When you make things on the internet for the public consumption of an audience, it affects your brain. I have not replayed many games I already had played since I started my blog. The original purpose of its game pile feature was to get through a very large collection of games, which is now more than half complete, which meant that there was a measure of tour guide speediness to it. A game got played, and I moved on. Games that took a long time had to be sandwiched between playthroughs of other, much smaller and faster games, because I had to make progress on the pile. This, I think, served to make games that were long, that I had to finish, more frustrating, and it very much soured me on those games for a while. Large games didn't tend to get large articles or long videos, and were rarely worth the effort when I could be playing more, smaller, faster games. And I usually found myself working on overviews or general impressions, or just digging into one part of the larger game that I found really interesting and letting the rest of the game fall away. When I talked about Mass Effect the first time, it was very much thinking about interfaces and moments and conclusions. It is a trilogy of very big, beefy games that I did not start until after I had the blog that fed into this channel. My memory of the first at the moment is that it's an ugly, tedious slog. The second is a much faster action movie that I liked a lot. And the third is bound up in the question of, is the ending any good? And that's something of a disservice to the big games, though not really one I feel bad about at all, because these are products made by companies that are overseen by shareholder nonsense. Whole chunks of the game get to carry the conversation, while other chunks of the game just skate on by, and to some extent, I like that. I don't think I, of all people, should be giving you extensive conversations about, say, the politics of Jacob in Mass Effect. But I also don't think that in all the talking I've done about Mass Effect, for all the time I spent on them, and, by the way, the absolutely sublime multiplayer that Mass Effect 3 had, I never really talked about the romances. Part of that is because a lot of them are deeply uninteresting. I don't find myself particularly attracted to a character who is both a bird and a cop. Those aren't things that fill my heart with joy. But I did think I could at least talk about the 5 romances in the game that I actually cared about. You know, that internet-friendly numbered list. Number 5. Anyone but Ashley. Wow, everyone who chose to keep Kaiden alive dodged a bullet here, didn't they? There is a lot of criticism of Ashley that I feel is misdirected. For example, there are complaints that she looks like a stripper, or that her uniform being pink and white in some versions is bad, or that she's brash and obnoxious. None of those are necessary marks against a character. After all, Gwenpool is brash and obnoxious and wears pink and white, and she's awesome. Execution plays a big part. There are some folk who claim that Ashley's disliked because she's a strong woman, and you know what? Maybe. I bet there are a lot of people who focus on the ways she makes them uncomfortable as a woman in a position of authority, and they use that as their reason to deride her. The problem is, the reason Ashley is the extra special bottom of my list is that she's a big old space racist. Diegetically, she isn't. Racism isn't about looking at entirely different species with different biological needs. And if we start dealing with actual aliens, it's going to be a huge pain in the ass when people start using racism to refer not to wanting alien greys to slurp out our brains or whatever. Racism is about the human social construct of race, which isn't even divided up by skin color like people imagine. There were pamphlets about stealth Jews, and ask a black comic fan sometime about the phrase incognegro. Hating and fearing and distrusting entirely different planets' peoples for having different inscrutable opinions and values to your own isn't the same thing as inventing bullshit reasons to treat other humans like garbage. But Ashley definitely does it in a racist way. The thing that sticks in my mind most often is that Ashley defensively shoots Rex because you're arguing with him. That's really uncomfortably close to the "he had a gun" or "he was hulking out" conversations you hear from actual racists when they want to justify a person in authority shooting a person of color. Calling people who are in the same room as you dogs is some pretty bad behavior, even if they don't necessarily know what a dog is. We know from her history that despite stellar performance and consistently excellent grades in all tests, she kept getting refused transfers to serve on ships, which, if there's no reason they're putting down officially in your paperwork, it's because they think you're a fucking asshole, Ashley. The comics try to claim it's because Command is prejudiced against Ashley Williams because of her extremely distinctive surname, making them realize she's the granddaughter of the first guy to surrender to the Turians. Because there aren't any other humans surnamed Williams. It's a very obscure name. Sure, Ashley. Plus, let's set aside how she compares to real-world racists. Ashley's attitude of, "we don't need other cultures to do shit," is just fantastically unhelpful to have when your job is going around the galaxy and interacting with other cultures an awful lot. Even just keeping a lid on it would be better. I don't remember Ashley having some especially high level of expertise representing some reasonable choice. And, dating co-workers is already dangerous with power differentials and all that, but it's gotta be worse when your girlfriend is an actual liability that can sink negotiations by just randomly being a shithead at people. By the way, one special extra note, Ashley brings up religion so you can talk about it with her, which drew criticism from Christian media critics who said that it sucked that a religious character was also an unlikable, superior, xenophobic jerk. And well, if the hat fits, Tier 4, Miranda. Alright, so look, if I had all that harsh stuff to say about Ashley, this one's gotta be a lift, right? I draw a line between Ashley's xenophobia and how she acted like a racist, because it's important to remember that it's not as simple as whether or not the character is right to trust the Citadel cultures in the Mass Effect universe. If being against aliens makes you a racist and Cerberus wants to promote humans, it's real hard to see Miranda as not, Nazi-ish. That's why it's important to bear in mind that Cerberus, in this stupid universe, actually have something of a point. The Citadel culture uplifted the Krogan to fight the Rachni, a culture uplifted by the Protheans, and then, realizing they'd fucked up, unleashed an honest-to-God actual plague on them that resulted in over a millennia of stillbirths and a steady cultural decline in what is both eugenics and a genocide. And this isn't just an example of any given culture in the Citadel being stupid. The Solarians built the Genophage because the Krogan would see it as a disincentive to misbehave, and the Asari explained its importance to the Krogans because nobody would be stupid enough to deploy it, and the Turians deployed it because yes, they fucking were. You needed multiple parts of the Citadel Council working together to make this millennia-long genocidal war crime happen, and in light of that, yeah, I can see it making a lot of sense that most cultures would regard the Citadel Council as untrustworthy for the protracted long-term health of any given spacefaring culture. With that in mind, it's not like the central concept for Cerberus, a human survivalist organization willing to ignore an untrustworthy power structure, makes you necessarily into a space Nazi. Now, don't get me wrong, Cerberus absolutely jumps off that cliff around the point they let Cthulhu space warp their inscrutable, unchallengeable leader's brains. Remember that conversation about power differentials? Miranda is one of the only characters of the series who isn't required to be there. She can bounce when she wants, and in Mass Effect 2, she's actually technically in charge of you, which, watch how far you can push that. Miranda is meant to be genetically perfected in the context of the Mass Effect universe, which is hilariously stupid, but it does make sense when you consider she's what her extremely basic asshole father thinks of as a perfect woman. It's a sign of what a different time it was that she's meant to be straight, though. I mean, there's mommy issues written all over her backstory, there's transness and queerness in the whole genetic conversation. Though I guess there is that interest she has in becoming a mother, and this is being the distant high-tech spacefaring future of whenever. Nobody's deduced technology as complicated as a turkey baster or trans rights. Man, these games are embarrassingly straight. Anyway, I never pursued the Miranda option in the game, but she seemed like someone who had actual opinions about that. Like, she would size up Shepard and ditch him if she didn't like something about the situation. Not the same player-centered sexuality you see with other characters. Plus, she has an Australian accent. That goes on the list, along with... Well, not a lot of characters, and most of them are creeps. Anyway, isn't that the best way to experience the Mass Effect romances anyway? To never pursue them, and instead imagine a much better fanficky version of what they probably would be if left alone? I like Miranda. There's the 10 posts of her character all stand on their own, and they're largely there in the game. Someone with a complex personal relationship space, a sense of professionalism, a withering sense of humor, and a willingness to turn away from a bad ideology when she comes to understand that it's bad. All told, you can do a lot worse. After all, there's Ashley. Tier 3, Liara. Oh, yeah, Liara's fine. Liara's fine. I didn't do much exploring here either, because I just wanted to know how, like, the Asari thing worked. And it's a lot more like that Asari reproduce asexually, but use a psychic impression of their partner as the salt to generate some kind of single-use egg key. Which, you know what? Neat. That's a legitimately interesting thing, because it removes a lot of biological incompatibilities, and it doesn't require making the whole species collapse in on itself until it can find another culture to breed with. It is neat the way that language breaks down describing what Liara is in human sexuality terms, because while we use pronouns like she and her for her, she's from a monogendered society, and they don't have any reason to have words for gender. She's the only option for a lesbian romance from a femshep in the first game, which makes sense when Shepard's looking at it, but also, Liara's not gay? Because in her culture, there's no need for gay as an idea. Sex and sexuality aren't tied to bodies or genitals. And in the case of the Asari, even less so. There's also an interesting conversation about whether the Asari are mind-affecting in a proactive way. Like, when there's this bit where the Solarians, Turians, and humans are looking at an Asari and are each pointing out her features that appeal to them specifically. Is that because Asari are telepathically slurping on brain juices to make them think they're cool? Or is it that these cultures with a shared genetic history, the Reapers did it, don't worry about it, are all just evolved on a concomitant line that means they have a shared pool of mimetic interests that the Asari evolved into? There's also the question of if the Asari have gender the way that humans do, which, why? But whatever, then surely they're a trans boy Asari, which sounds like they might be super cool, but also the last people I want handling all that are 2008 BioWare. Oh, yeah, I didn't actually have much to say about Liara. I bet she's just super nice. Tier 2. Thane. What do you mean this guy's straight? What the hell? I got ripped off. Tier 1. The absolutely not there gay Tali ship. And alright, here's the reason why I didn't pursue any romance in any of the Mass Effect games I played. See, I played FemShep, and I played through once. One big single playthrough with all of the save continuing I could do, because I played Quest for Glory when I was a kid, and it permanently deformed my brain. While playing, I watched Tali and Shep interact, and this very stable platform of common interests, of talking about their problems and their lives, obviously with Tali sharing more than Shep, and it created the impression that Tali never got listened to in her normal life, and my Shep was just always willing to listen to her. You know, because I had a genuine interest in Tali and Tali's stories, and she didn't make that experience painful or tedious, and so I, the player, just liked being around her, and as a result, my Shep liked being around her and liked listening to her. She was always willing to interrupt what she was doing to pay attention to Tali and her problems, just vigilantly checking for when there was an opportunity for time with Tali. Hey, girl, you don't look like you're doing okay. I'm listening. I'm here. You can tell me anything. And that continues and starts to escalate until we go from protecting Tali from the Geth in Mass Effect 1 to be gallant to, sure, I'll fight off a planetary invasion for you, babe. I'll liberate your world. Dear God, will she please notice me now? You don't have to just, maybe just think about it. This did not get my Shep to side against the Geth, though. Legion's a friend. I had to find a third way. That's the story that the game played out in my head by making the experience of playing with and around Tali more enjoyable than any of the romances they set up. My Shep never romanced anyone because she was yearning for Tali, who was, as strange as it is, straight. The Quarians have a culture of binary genders and a specific vision of how binary gender relates to her attraction and her sexual interests. But she's also a xenophile who found interacting with other species attractive, and she's into Garrus, and he's a bird. His genes are probably like XZ, and they don't even share a protein base, but he uses he, him pronouns, and apparently pronouns are what does it for her. I'm fine. Look, Mass Effect's actual romance has completely failed to catch my attention. I tried a bunch of them, I watched pieces of them on YouTube, and I read guides, and every time I found myself confronting the fact that the character I was playing, who was this dashing, gallant, heroic character who had common interests with people and wanted to connect with them over them, didn't want to spend too much time with the people that this game thought I should want to kiss. But doesn't matter, because the game let me play around, and it let me get creative, and I wound up imagining and finding this story. So, in the same way that somewhere there is a version of Shep that makes out with Thane and they're both guys, there's a version of my femme Shep who still pines for Tali, even all the way to the end. Oh, and for everyone who got real mad that Tali under the mask looks like a generic hot lady, have you not seen how this universe works? You are not dealing with a challenging space.